If you love history, you are going to love this edition of Our Little Corner in downtown Plattsburgh. Sometime back, Calvin and I took a walking and driving tour and looked at some of the old buildings in downtown Plattsburgh. Even though we didn't know a great deal of the history, we showed what they looked like in 1999 before the turn of the century. And I don't know, we won't be able to say that again in our lifetime probably. But we're at 30 Brinkerhoff Street now with Sylvia Stack. How are you, Sylvia?
I'm great. Thank you for being here, Gordy.
This is the neatest building. First of all, I should tell you that this is the North Country Cultural Center for the Arts. Most of our viewers will remember this as the old Merchants Bank building from way back when, right, Sylvia?
That's right. It was started in 1922 and it was finished and dedicated in 1923.
And all of a sudden, we find that it's taken on a whole new life. How did you get involved here?
Well, a group of us got together and decided that we would like to put together a museum and a multicultural center. And so from that, we started and we applied for all of our licenses. We became incorporated as a not-for-profit. We got our 501(c)(3), and we started. We're all artists. I have a degree in art history. Others have it in studio arts and teaching arts. So together we started, and we've been in business now for about 8.5 months, and we're really thrilled at the reception that we've had from the community.
I was here for the opening of this new show. I should remind our viewers, Calvin will put it on the screen at some point in time, that we're recording this on what I think is the 9th day of April, 2001. On the 7th day of April, the exciting opening of this show, which we'll reveal to you on the inside in just a few minutes, drew, 300 and some people?
I think during the whole course of the day, we probably had around 300 people going into the evening, and it didn't end. Normally would have ended at 7, and we were here till almost 8.
I love it. This is an historic building in downtown Plattsburgh, no question about it. These massive columns in the front were really patterned after the Parthenon?
Yes, actually the building material itself is called litholite. It's man-made, and it simulates granite. Was taken from the Greeks. It was patterned after the Parthenon. The pillars are of the Doric order, and that is right at the very top. If you can see the rectangle and then the circle around, yes. That's called the Capitol, and that is of the Doric style. Each of these pillars weighs approximately 18 ton.
Wow.
And you have 4 of them, and then it rests on what they call the stylobate. This is this right here.
Oh, yes.
Right, and that also weighs about 15 ton.
Can you believe that?
Mm-hmm. And the materials used inside are nothing but the very, very best. They're imported from all around the world.
Sylvia, how did you happen to find out about the history of the building? Were there blueprints around or something?
No, when I was doing research for the show that's on now, I went over to speak with Addie Shields, and she just happened to have the little booklet that was given out on Dedication Day.
You got it. In 1922?
That's right, 1923 when it was given out, and she has it, and it's very good condition. And so I copied it down because we want to try to copy it and maybe sell the little books as a fundraiser.
It makes perfect sense to me. But who would ever dream that this Merchants Bank would turn into a cultural center? It's such a great transition.
It really is, and one of the interesting things when you read the little dedication brochure, they started off with, "From a little acorn, a mighty oak grew," and so we're hoping that we're going to be the same. We're again this little acorn, probably a shoot off of it.
Well, if the enthusiastic response from last Friday night for your opening is any indication, you are going to do very well here.
Well, thank you very much.
We're going to move inside and see this fabulous exhibit, talk with some of the people who are responsible for the things that are here, and meet a wonderful old friend of ours, Ron Venn, who's been on this program almost as much as Calvin and myself, and remind our viewers that this exhibit will be here for, about a month?
Yes, it'll be here until May 16th, and we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 4.
That's terrific. Let's go inside and find out what it's all about. To the memory of the founders and first executive officers, Alfred Gibbard, John M. Weaver, this building is dedicated.
That's correct. And again, we see the whole building style is from the ancient Greece, as we said, the Parthenon. And inside, they've tried to carry through that same thought. You can see, notice right here on the pilaster, it's fluted. But this time, at the very top there of the pillar, that's the Ionic order of the capital. And I'll tell you about the walls.
Yeah, I'm following you.
Okay. All of these
Let
walls...
me get over here next to you, okay.
All of the walls within the interior of the building are called, they're made of a substance called K-stone, and it's quarried in Normandy, France.
Wow.
And it's quarried near a place where William the Conqueror is buried. Yes, and also Henry VII Cathedral in England at Westminster is also built of this material. It's extremely durable, and it's been around for centuries.
Obviously, it's still here and still looking great. When you came in here, did you have to make a lot of changes? Did you have to do painting?
No, we've actually done absolutely nothing except wash the curtains.
Come on.
No, everything was in excellent condition. It had been, I think, just not too many years before painted, and so it was left in really very good condition. And I want to show you this over here. This is marble, and this is this was brought from Italy. It's was quarried in around Rome. It's black and gold, and you can see we have it all down along here. And then you'll notice that going along the top, there is a frieze similar to the Grecian key. And notice in the architect how in his design, he wanted to lead your eye around. And in classical Greece, they liked things to be very balanced. Notice the bands that come around the wall, carry your eye right around. Yep. And then at the top, they've taken from ancient mythology, you'll see a man with the body of a horse. That was to ascribe certain characteristics, certain strengths to man. Sometimes they'll use a lion and everything. And that's in a beautiful, soft pastel colors.
Sylvia, you must have gone crazy when you came in here and thought, oh boy, what can I do with this space?
At first, we didn't know if we could make this was so much space. We were just hoping. We thought we'd give it a try, and it really worked. And what happens, it's very interesting because when people come into the building, they treat it somewhat like a church. Because I think it's because of its tremendous height, just like
It
Gothic
inspires awe,
architecture.
I have to
Yes,
say that.
and we find that they whisper, and everyone just loves the idea of it, and constantly I hear people say, oh, this is just what Plattsburgh needs, you know?
Well, doesn't that make you feel good when you had that embryonic idea? And you and I have talked several times about your dreams. And I love people's dreams, especially with bright people who find a way to carry those dreams out.
Well, I have to say, it's not just myself, though, that runs it. I do have 4 other main partners, Jackie Sayburn, Sarah Tucker, Adelina Gray, Robin Rentis. We are the main ones, and we also have our board.
So tell us what that dream is. I know what people who come in here and view this exhibit will get a little background in their brochure, but tell us what the overall plan is here and the things you've already done and what you hope to do.
Well, we've had quite a few visual artist exhibits here, but what the main thrust of what we'd like to do is we would like to have it, we're categorized by the New York State Council on the Arts as a multicultural center. And what I'm hoping is that we could bring artists in here to exhibit, to help make our artists grow, to show them what's going on in the rest of the world, and also to put on exhibits like this that people could come and see, probably work with other museums throughout the country, bring exhibits in here. And also, we are a teaching organization. We work with children at risk, and we also run summer camps for children within the city of Plattsburgh, or in fact, anyone who wants to come. And we're hoping that through starting them early, they will learn about art, but it will also give them something to do with their spare time that's very productive. And I think today in a technological world that the arts are ever so much more important.
And you also having poetry reading?
We have poetry readings, we have literature, literary groups, and we are hoping that we will just keep going because we do want to be have a teaching aspect to our organization. And we just want it to be a friendly place where people will drop in and know that they can just stay as long as they like.
Before we go too much farther, we should tell our viewers how does one get funding for a fabulous organization such as this?
Well, we have no paid help, and we get funding from, right now we are primarily from our membership. For this specific show, I wrote a grant, which was through the New York State Council on the Arts, administered through the Clinton County Arts Council. And primarily we write grants. And we're just hoping we're going to be doing a major membership drive soon, and we're just hoping that we can double our membership. And we will be funded for our overhead expenses after we have been in business for 3 years partially by the New York State Council on the Arts.
So you'll be looking for some local help.
Oh, absolutely. This has to be a project that the community has to get behind us on if we're to be really successful.
Don't you feel as though the time is just right for this organization to blossom when we're kind of invoking the voices of our ancestors and looking at old photographs and things and trying to instill in the local populace a passion for their history, and now just to open right now in the middle of it all? I think somebody had a plan beyond you, Sylvia.
Probably. I think it's a great time when we're trying to give a renaissance to the downtown of Plattsburgh. And I have to say that the mayor has been extremely supportive of us, and our next show, which will be the Triangle of Excellence, which both the Clinton County Arts Council and ourselves will be putting on. And from all corners of the community, we've had really great support. And I think this will add to the downtown. I think what a lot of people in Plattsburgh don't realize, all the beautiful architecture that this city had and all that we have, it is really so beautiful. And we really have a community to be proud of.
The next step before we actually begin our tour would be to learn a little bit more about Sylvia Stack, where you came from and how you ended up standing here talking to me today. Where were you originally from?
Well, I'm from Plattsburgh, and I graduated here from Plattsburgh High School. And I went on to school. I graduated from Fashion Institute of Technology with a degree in apparel design. I then got a degree from C.W. Post in art history.
No kidding.
And I worked in Manhattan for about 25 or 30 years as a dress designer. And for 10 years I had my own business, Melanie Road Jr.'s, 1375 Broadway. And then when I retired in '87, I decided to come home. Yes, it's funny, but all through my life I always felt I lived on Long Island, worked in New York, but my home was always Plattsburgh.
That's wonderful.
So here I am again, and I got back into the arts and just happened to meet up with people that we all had this same idea in a sense, and here we are.
People love to come home at one time or another, and many people end up retiring here or living in their later years back in Plattsburgh. We've seen it happen when the air base was here. People would retire and come home, and so many people return. I guess it kind of draws you, doesn't it?
It does. You know, one of the nice things that I have found is that I can walk along the streets, and even though something isn't there anymore, I'm very happy that secretly I know what was there, and it makes you feel kind of special in your hometown for knowing that.
And that's exactly what happened. As you know, I love to walk around with people and see what their reaction is to an opening such as this, or a play, wherever it happened to be. And that's the reaction people were giving. They were looking at pictures saying, I remember when the theater was here, and I remember my house, the closing from my house was right in this bank, I had somebody tell me.
Yeah, it's really great because I think we want to hold on to these things and thoughts of when things were so much more simple, you know, and it really takes you back, and it's a sense of pleasure.
I love it. I like a sense of pleasure anytime, especially at my age. We're going to continue our tour and talk with some of the principal characters responsible for this day as we continue with our little corner. We're in the vestibule or the foyer looking at the pictures that are on the walls as you would enter this display at the old Merchants Bank building, 30 Brinkerhoff Street. And of course, we have to look at the Strand Theater. You saw as it looks today in the early part of our taping this morning, right here in Brinkerhoff Street in Plattsburgh, and that's when it was in its heyday. And several of the other theaters, the Plattsburgh Theater, downtown Plattsburgh, the Palace Theater was here, the Wonderland Theater, and there were others, the Champlain Theater and others you may have seen named through the years. That's a tinted photograph from way back when, and I'm guessing that would be Bridge Street. And I think I can see the trolley tracks right down the middle. Kind of interesting. Great old, you'll see many of these old photographs of downtown Plattsburgh before we finish today. On the far wall, photographs that you have seen before, at least one of them, in the Ron Venn collection, the before and after collection, of which we've spent so much time looking at in the past. And the Scamotion River School. That was taken somewhere around 1900. That building still existed, I believe, when I first came here, and one of my early jobs at the radio station was to cover an election there, and I believe it was 1961. The results were disastrous because the ladies counting the ballots got mad and took the ballots home, and I never got the numbers for the radio station. But for those people who are affectionately known as Crickers, right, from Scamotion Creek, this, of course, is the sandwich board that announces North Country Cultural Center for the Arts. The initials are NCCCA. Those initials you will be hearing quite often. And for the benefit of our viewers, this North Country Cultural Center for the Arts is open Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 4. We're going to go inside and begin our tour. When I first came here this morning, I had to make sure I got his name right. Derek Beneke Bove, right?
Correct.
Oh, classy name, hyphenated name. Derek, that's wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you said you feel like you're from this area, but actually you're from Comac, Long Island, right?
That's correct. Been here for 5 years. Hopefully we'll be graduating soon, so definitely spent quite a bit of time up here over the last couple of years.
The reason you're here is because you got very much immersed in a project which is exhibited all the way around this opening, if you will. It's for the last several days, and it's called the what project?
Well, it's a senior topic or a senior capstone project. When you graduate with a history major from SUNY Plattsburgh, your senior topic, you have to pick a topic, and you do quite a bit of research and work on that. Therefore, the outcome is substantial and hopefully something that you can be proud of as a significant piece of work.
You got into it a little even deeper than you anticipated in the beginning, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
That's always the way.
I estimate this project took me between 550 and 600 hours to complete. All the photographic work was done by me, as well as the research. So not only was I looking through old documents and various newspapers, but I was also spending a large amount of time in the darkroom developing some of the negatives for this show. In fact,
what have you got there?
This is a glass plate negative. This is the form that a lot of the negatives were in when I found them. And what I would have, my job, or part of my job, was to yield a good quality print out of a negative that could have been taken 100 years ago.
You said some of the pictures were actually taken more than 100 years ago.
Yes, some of them were. There's a picture from the old Plattsburgh base that was taken in 1897.
Isn't that neat? There are literally tens of thousands of glass plate negatives that exist in the area. We are so fortunate.
That's part of the reason why I did this project, is there is so many negatives, and from a historic standpoint, I think it's great to be able to preserve the photographic record of this area, especially since a lot of these negatives haven't been developed and people don't know what's on them.
Well, unfortunately, you didn't get paid millions of dollars for doing this project. Hopefully you'll get the the accolades from many people who see what you've done here, and hopefully you'll get some credit for it too at the college, right?
Yes, I had a good amount of people come down from the college, and I think they were impressed. I hope they liked it, and I definitely think it's something to be proud of.
Actually, this project for you started as more of a history project than a photography project, didn't it?
Well, the history department offers the alternative history project, which is something other than a paper. And having a photography minor, I just couldn't pass this type of project up. So I enlisted the help of the photography department, and one thing led to another.
How long ago did you start it?
This project was started in September of 2000, and it was finished in April.
So a few sleepless nights, is that what you're telling us, Derek?
Quite a few sleepless nights.
How many did you do? How many did you develop?
I developed a total of 60 or 70 black and white negatives. Not all of them are shown here. Some of them I didn't like the image, some of it picture just wasn't there. Then I put about another 23 colored images. Some of these black and white images were extremely difficult to work with, and they would take somewhere in the area of maybe 6 to 8 hours to develop just an individual image.
For one?
For one picture.
Wow. I think it's important that we lay that kind of groundwork to let people know, gives them even more appreciation when they come to see these photographs, because you've done a magnificent job. Where would you like to start in showing us the pictures?
Well, why don't we start in the back, and then I'll show you some of the older ones that I did, and we can work our way around.
All right, let's do it. Sylvia, before we begin looking at the photographs closely, let me ask you who owns this building and how you came by it.
Well, it's owned by Bob Garrett, and when we conceived this idea, we came over and we spoke with Bob, and he really gave us tremendous support. And if it hadn't been for his generosity, I'm sure we would not be here today. For the first 6 months, he allowed us to stay here, just paying the telephone and the lights, and of course it was summertime, so the bills were very, very small, under $100 for the first 6 months. We probably paid a month. So we really owe a great deal to him, and he's been very, very supportive of us, and he truly believes in what we are doing.
Gee, that's great. I wanted to make sure, because I know it costs a lot to maintain a building like that, and hopefully those grants will be flowing for a long time to come.
Yes, especially in the wintertime now when the fuel oil is so expensive, and you actually, because it's the old hot water system, you have to heat the entire building, unlike if it were electric, you know. But we sure do owe a lot to Bob.
All right, let's begin our tour of the photographs.
Okay.
Just so you get a little more of the flavor of this wonderful old Merchants Bank building from 1922. These are some of the individual offices, cubicles, if you will, in the back of the bank building, which were occupied during its bustling times. And the great woodwork is still here. The architecture is still part of the building. Right now, these rooms aren't being used, but I'll bet you this organization finds a use for them at some time. All right, Derek. You're the boss. Show us everything and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, these are some of the pictures that I developed, and you'll see there isn't too many colored images here. There's one of the courthouse, but a lot of them, there just was nothing really left to take a picture of. So I still like the images, and I felt they should be displayed. However, there wasn't a corresponding color image to go with.
We have Ron Venn, of course, that we're going to talk to a little while later, and he kind of came up with this idea of before and after, and he's done it with well over 1,000 photographs, and I see that's been done here on the exterior of the old courthouse in 1930. Significant because it's gone through many changes. I was talking with a former city policeman. When I came here, the police department was downtown. The sheriff's department was in that building. It's now undergoing a metamorphosis, and in the back of it, the probation department will be moving at some time very soon. So things have changed a great deal since 1930. There's a view of it in 2000, a color photograph taken at roughly the same time of year. So you can understand that that's one of the stately old buildings in downtown Plattsburgh with a lot of history. What else have we got here?
We have the interior of the courthouse.
Oh, right there, about 1930.
You also have, by the old railroad station, this was slightly past it going down Bridge Street. You had the D&H rail yard back there, and that's showing the freight house in 1927 during what looks like a rather large Maytag promotion.
And if you're to believe the advertising, some of those washing machines are probably still cranking out the wash. Look at the old washing machines.
Those things were available in either diesel or electric powered at that time.
I wasn't born until 1937, but believe me, my mother had one of those identical washing machines. Yes, you could have a diesel-powered model if you wanted one. And the old motors off of those machines, I think we built our first motorbike with one of the motors off of those old machines way back when. Here's a steam laundry. I have no idea where that was located, 1915 to 1920.
Well, actually, the steam laundry started in about 1889, and it closed down around 1925. It's located on 60 to 62 River Street.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, which is now Durkee Street.
Yes. The steam laundry actually didn't go out of business. They were doing an urban renewal project in which the buildings around it and that building were closed down, and Plattsburgh had bigger and better plans for it. So they were planning to move and reopen, however, that never occurred.
And now there's some controversy over the farmers market area in downtown Plattsburgh, and buying back some of the rights to do some expansion for the farmers market from somebody it was given to because we were going to put all kinds of parking garages on stilts and things in downtown Plattsburgh. This is perhaps the oldest of your images.
Yes, it's the oldest image that I presented. It's the 1897 NCO Academy graduating class. It was a very difficult image to work with, partly due to its age and had some deterioration. But just a beautiful picture, historically and especially in military history. Just look at the bicycle mustaches and just the way the military was. I figure that's shortly after the Spanish-American War.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time, and unfortunately, but fortunately because we have an image of it, a lot of Plattsburgh downtown area was destroyed by fire in many different times during its history, but there were some horrible fires in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Boy, there's a picture of one of them right there. We have no idea what year that was.
I wish I could find out more about that picture. I've taken that to just about everybody I could think of to see if they could identify anything. It's just mostly rubble, but a beautiful picture and just gives you an idea of what downtown Plattsburgh would be like during one of its many blazes.
Yeah, there were a lot of wooden structures, of course, in those days, and fire walls were less in existence then than they are now, and so when a fire started, and you had much more embryonic firefighting techniques back in those days, it very often would sweep through an entire area, if not a city block, sometimes 2 or 3 blocks in downtown Plattsburgh. Kind of neat.
Well, several of the fires that they had would clear out huge sections of Plattsburgh in a matter of an hour or two.
Doesn't take long, depending on the weather conditions, that's for sure. All right, let's move on and keep filming as we go. Well, downtown Plattsburgh is recovering, shall we say, and has been for a few years, but boy, it was a hubbub of activity back in the days. Were around 1930 when this first photograph in the lower right-hand side was taken, Merkel's department store.
Yes, Merkel's provided Plattsburgh with 83 years of cheerful service.
Oh, he's got the commercial down pat.
And
it closed in the last few years, and that's what it looked like much more recently on the top, huh?
Yes, the store actually was quite large in its peak. It had various branches in the local area and I think the Plattsburgh store employed about 75 people.
It had an elevator before there were many elevators in town. Just for the benefit of all my newspaper column readers, there was no escalator in Merkel's department store, but there was an elevator. They had one of the very first devices, those tubes for sending information back and forth from downtown up into the office. Banks still use similar tubes today, and I have one of the brass containers where you would put your money in, they'd send it up to the office, and your change would come down. That was kind of neat, and it was a pneumatic system that they used. All right, next to that, the American Legion, from around 1930, 1940, that's the interior of the American Legion, right?
Correct. You have an exterior shot of their building, and then you have a picture of their new building over on Quarry Road. The Legion left the Smith-Weed house, from what I understand, because there was an electrical fire, which did substantial damage to the building.
Tremendous damage, and it's right near the bridge, to let people know, right near what's called the Smith-Weed Bridge, a bridge that was replaced with great controversy about 25 or 30 years ago. And the building was used by the Legion for years and is now the law offices of Stafford and his associates, right?
Correct.
Right near on Cumberland Avenue. And on the left-hand side is the current American Legion building, which is an historic old house, actually, from the Quarry Road, right off Boynton Avenue.
That's the Isaac Platt House that they currently occupy. They have seemed to put quite a few extensions on the back of it.
It's really quite nice, and Calvin and I have been there in many times, that's for sure. The bottom three photographs tell a heck of a story, that's for sure. We see the normal school, 1915 to 1920. My wife's mother, the late Leona Vaughn, graduated from the normal school in that time period and taught in this area in one-room schoolhouses for a while. It's a tremendous fire. We've done the history of Hawkins Hall. The normal school fire was in 1929. It was devastating. And you talked about fires that only took about an hour. Within a half an hour, this building was just about gone back in those days. Recently, there's an update to give you an idea what Hawkins Hall looks like today. It underwent an amazing rebuilding and renovation project. It was just finished in 1988 and 1999. So it's kind of an incredible building, and I talked with many of the workmen who had to do work down in the basement, and they never saw such construction in their lives when they were trying to tear some of the walls apart. That's an amazing building. I'm sure you've been in there many times, Garrett.
Oh, definitely. I've been in there quite a bit. I'm just kind of amazed at what the building used to look like, because you look at it and totally rebuilt, and there it is as it was originally designed. Is that they said the fire that destroyed that started in the boiler room.
We were hoping, by talking about it on this program called Our Little Corner, originating in Hometown Cable, that we would find out what happened to a beautiful fountain that they had in the pond after the fire. It just disappeared. Nobody knows where it went. We've seen photographs of it. We tried to find out from people who might have been alive in 1929 after the fire, and nobody came forward. So we don't know if that's in somebody's backyard somewhere or if it was destroyed.
I have no idea what that is. Didn't come across it.
All right, very interesting. Well, let's turn around and look at some of these photographs here, and you can just tell us what we're looking at. Where do you want to start?
Well, some of these are businesses that used to be in Plattsburgh, Dooley's Garage being one of them. Is located on Cornelia Street and then later on Miller Street. Then after that you have the City Beach. Sorry, going across the bottom.
Oh, isn't that neat? Look at that picture. Everybody parked on the sand.
That was shortly after the beach was established, and it was quite a bit of effort put into making the City Beach, and town just loved it.
They certainly did, and right up until the 1960s and 70s, when our Canadian friends from the north came down to utilize our beach facilities, and then we know what happened to the Canadian dollar and some bad weather in years when we didn't have too much sand because the lake level was high, and it's been a struggle to make ends meet at the municipal beach for the last few years. And this year, with several feet of snow still remaining in the mountains, the lake level is bound to rise, and I bet there won't be too much sand to enjoy this summer on the beach. But those are great photographs. All right, over here.
Over here you have Union Garage, which is located at 15 Margaret Street. This is adjacent to the Union Hotel. This is one of the pictures I liked because it shows you the difference between Plattsburgh then and now. You have all these buildings that were there, and in the modern day image, you just have an open space and some trees.
But the memories are still here, and the best part of viewing a display like this is listening to the people saying, I remember when that was there, and I remember when the hotel was there, etc. Here's another business that was an icon in the North Country, A.E. Mason. That would have been taken way back when. Get a view of one of the old trucks that's loaded right down.
That picture, I was able to identify that as the Peru Lumber Yard. Now the picture above it is where their showroom would have been in Plattsburgh.
Right, just adjacent to the Plattsburgh City Police Station on Pine Street in Plattsburgh, it would be to the left of where that picture was taken.
Oh, that's correct. And just want to say thank you very much to the Peru Library because they were able to help me out quite a bit with that.
Oh, they were?
Yes, they were.
That's really neat. And over here, we've seen there are a lot of photographs taken from that direction and from the other direction, too, on Bridge Street down through the years. It's very interesting to see how it is. Bridge Street was significant, and the Bridge Street Bridge was significant in that a group of teenage boys defended the city during the Battle of Plattsburgh in the War of 1812 right at that spot. This is some kind of a parade way back when.
That's when the bridge was reopened in 1930. I think it was in November of 1930. In 1920, the bridge had a partial collapse, which killed 2 people and prompted the rebuilding of the bridge.
No kidding.
Actually, they said that the sidewalk caved in and it pinned 2 people underneath some rubble, and they subsequently drowned.
Jeez, I wasn't aware of that. I learned by interviewing several people in their 90s trying to find out the origin of Fox Hill recently that a huge flume near the South Catherine Street Bridge washed out the roadway, and the trolley tracks were suspended in air at one point in time, which would have been back, I would guess, about 1915, and one of the gentlemen I interviewed was on the trolley at the time. He said the guy hit the brakes just in time and stopped, and they looked out, and there were the tracks right in midair.
The trolley tracks here weren't damaged, though, but the bridge was considered unstable, and they moved rather quickly to redesign a new bridge and have it up and running. And that parade there, they estimated about 5,000 people showed up at a time when the city was about 15,000.
That's amazing, and we still draw quite a large crowd for our big 4th of July parade in downtown Plattsburgh. Calvin and I have covered it for many times. In the radio business, I covered 4th of July parades back into the early 1960s. In 1964, Plattsburgh celebrated its sesquicentennial, and we had a pretty nice grand marshal of the parade that year. His name was Louis Satchmo Armstrong. On his 64th birthday on the 4th of July, he adorned our parade and played his music in several different venues that year, and it was one of the highlights of my young radio career. This amazing safe is not a photograph. It is not a reproduction. Sylvia, let's just talk about this vault just for a second. It's so massive and wonderful.
Yes, actually, excuse me, when this safe was put in 1922-23, the only other safe that was as safe was the Federal Reserve in New York City. It's the door itself is 18 inches deep, and it weighs 15 ton. These bolts right here, they go the full length of the safe. And inside, what they kept here was primarily the safety deposit boxes. And all of the walls are made with a special material. And within that, they have very close together steel rods. And then after they put the, it's kind of like a cement, I think it was called Secret. And they put that on, and then they put on electrified wires very, very close so that if anyone would drill or try to break into this, it would immediately set off the alarm. And they also, right downstairs under this, they have another vault where people would bring things like their sterling or trunks of things or something that they wanted to keep safe. This is really, really something here.
It certainly does focus your attention the moment you walk in the front door. It always did.
Everything in this bank was to reflect a very strong, solid foundation. And at that time, that's how banks were built, because you got to remember, people weren't used to putting their monies in banks. They kept that under their mattress in a jar. But so in order to instill the confidence of the bank, the business, they built things this sturdy.
This is
This is one of a
little
kind.
did they know in 1922 that the Great Depression would be coming
Yes.
close on the heels of the opening of this bank.
Yeah, well, it's really something great. We have a lot of interest. The reason we're keeping it locked right now is that kids just love to go in there, and we did get a couple in there, and we had a tough time getting them out.
Well, I just wanted to say there is a strategic plan that has to do with this cultural center. If you come in here and you show disdain for anything in this building, you'll be locked in here for 3 days. No, we made that up. All right, Derek, let's move over here and explain what we've got here. This is kind of neat because Calvin and I have just recorded 2 retrospective programs for the Diamond Jubilee year of the local medical center, which began as a plan by Dr. Silver, and thanks to the wonderful philanthropy of Mr. Miner, the Physicians Hospital was opened on January 1st, 1926. After 3 years in construction, that's a picture of it, and that's what the CVPH Medical Center, a wonderful regional medical center, looks like these days. So that gives you an idea. Somebody sat down at a table and crossed 2 matchsticks, right? And said, yeah, here would be a good idea for a theme for this hospital, and sure enough, that's the way it turned out. We've interviewed some of the nurses who graduated from the Physicians Hospital School of Nursing in 1934. Mm-hmm. We had a roundtable discussion with 7 of the mostly retired physicians who've worked here, with the exception of A.B. de Grand Prix, who is timeless, but who was enjoying a much-needed rest in Florida when we did our interview. And so it's very interesting. Now, Plattsburgh Shoe Hospital in downtown Plattsburgh, right?
Still there.
Still there in the same location. You see the then and now. As a matter of fact, I wrote an entire column of taking an old pair of shoes, which my wife tried to throw away about 10 times down there, and got them repaired, so he breathed new life into my old shoes.
From my understanding, that's been a family-run business throughout its life. Trade has been passed down from one generation to the next. I think they're currently working on the 3rd generation.
Yep. There was another shoe hospital, or a shoe repair store up on Margaret Street downtown from Arnie's. It was called Pavone's Shoe Hospital for many years. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was for a long, long time. Look at this. Some pictures from PHS, the faculty, in 1926.
I had to include this picture just as a commentary on what portraiture was like back in the 20s. Just the formality of it is amazing when you compare it to what the pictures from a yearbook look like right now.
Not too many informal smiles there, were there?
No, there wasn't.
Somebody didn't invent say cheese until later, I guess. Up above, that's a classic picture of the 1920 baseball team at Plattsburgh High School.
That was the year that they won one of their championships. What I find interesting, though, is if you look up in the corner, you could see what the photographer had etched out what looks like, I'd guess, the Bat Boy.
Come on. No, really. See, you would notice that, and I wouldn't. Why, is there a shadow there?
Well, if you look very closely, you could see there's a difference in the grass, and it silhouettes a human shape.
See, only you would notice that, Derek. Today, it's possible to do that very easily, digitally. Mm-hmm. In those days, it was a very different process, wasn't it?
Well, from what I'm guessing that he did is he actually scratched out the person, removing all of the emulsion from the negative, and then had to paint it back in with something that closely resembled the surrounding area.
Now, I wonder, why would somebody do that?
Maybe the person quit, or...
yeah, who knows? Well, maybe there might be somebody alive who would know that. Talk about another mystery. I think that's really neat. All right. The brass rail. Wow.
Brass rail, and
there it is.
There it is, and there it is right now. The Evergreen Bank. You'd hardly even know they were the same building.
Yep.
Which wasn't able to find too much about that. People do remember the brass rail.
Oh, yeah. And the old parking meters there, you see.
Said it was an interesting place to be. Again,
I guess it was. That's great. And Woolworths, of course, which was very familiar right up until recent years. It didn't close that many years ago. Fishman's and Woolworths. 5 and 10 cent stores. They were common across the nation. F.W. Woolworths and several others popular here. And that was somebody's Ellsbury hairdressing parlors. Dr. Dare was upstairs. Wow, that turned out very well, didn't it?
Just one comment when it comes to reproducing the pictures is that when you're printing them, especially, I guess, in a historic style, you try to get all of the information that's on the negative onto the picture so you can show as much of what used to be there. So you're not losing anything in the shadows, so you can try to read all the printing. And it's a very hard way to print because you can't just say, I liked it like that.
Yeah, that's true. And then, of course, up above, that's what it looks like today.
I think you can even see the awning that was used in a somewhat tattered form. But
Yep. Most of the stores in downtown Plattsburgh had awnings that you could crank out during the day and crank in during the night. All right, let me step over my cord and let's take a look at this. Look at this. Army-Navy store in the mid to late 30s.
As you can see, that was where the Cornerstone bookstore is right now, which I think everyone in Plattsburgh probably knows the Cornerstone. That was run by the Kaplan family, the Army-Navy stores. They had quite a franchise going in various locations all over Plattsburgh.
And it moved almost across the street from there in later years, and I used to, as a matter of fact, in the early days of WIRY radio station before I went there, the late Martin Mannix and others would broadcast the 12:30 news, or the 12 o'clock news as it was back in those days, right from the window of the National Army store, which ultimately became Bell stores in Plattsburgh before they went out of business. The latest business in there now is self-defense business, I understand.
I think you're referring to Valari's?
Yeah. I think that's where the Bell stores was located. Yep. And we have spent quite a bit of time in the Cornerstone bookstore, that's for sure. All right, McDonough Monument in the 1920s. We've done some wonderful TV shows with City Clerk Keith Herculow, who described the monument. That's what.
Bailey.
And, oh yes, Jim Bailey.
Jim Bailey.
Jim Bailey. One of those Bailey boys. Yeah, Jim Bailey. And
that must be a Freudian slip. I walked in this bank, I thought of It's a Wonderful Life with George
that
Bailey.
amazing?
Jimmy Stewart is George Bailey, so instead of Jim Bailey popping out, I had George Bailey.
There's some history right there. Occasionally, the McDonough Monument is open to the public now, not nearly as often as I would like to see it. But it certainly is a landmark in downtown Plattsburgh.
Yes, and one thing, as you can see, is it's changed very little over the years.
Now, the building itself certainly hasn't changed. There's been a lot of controversy on how to paint the dome. The third floor of Plattsburgh City Hall, which you can see there, has undergone an amazing restoration thanks to Keith Herculow, who was the clerk. And there have been a lot of changes behind the monument now. There's a gazebo down there, and there are walkways, and parts of the Riverwalk have been extended. And there are a lot of great concerts there and reenactments during the Battle of Plattsburgh celebration as well. It's right on the banks of the Saranac River. Kind of neat. All right. Let's move over here. And what do we have here?
Well, on top you have the current day Press Republican, and you also have two pictures from what used to be the Plattsburgh Republican.
That would have been on... that wasn't on Court Street.
23 Clinton Street.
Clinton Street, yeah. Clinton Street, yep.
Right in here you have the composing room from the old Republican. They were very helpful down there. I must say thank you to the Press Republican for giving me information about the old printing techniques that were used. From what I learned from them was that these down here were basically blocks of lead. And these machines, you would type out your article, and they would be typed into the lead, therefore making a raised template, which would be pushed into what they called a chase, and then inked up, and the paper would be run over it.
Isn't that amazing? Originally, every letter had to be set.
Mm-hmm.
And then this business came along doing it that way. There's the inside of the Cumberland.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, as many of our viewers know, you'll see several photographs of the Cumberland. It was destroyed in a tragic fire, which I covered on the news, on the radio station when it burned. It was one of downtown Plattsburgh's massive fires. But it's interesting to me because when I first came to Plattsburgh, which would have been probably in early June of 1961, the Greyhound bus would come around the corner and park right in front, and you'd get out, and that's where the bus station was, in the lobby of the Cumberland Hotel. And that's where I spent, having arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's where I spent the rest of the night reading the Press Republican and drinking coffee and awaiting my first interview at WEAV, which was then at 38 Court Street, not far from that building.
Well, you had mentioned earlier that you used to have a radio station that broadcasted out of what was the Cornerstone Bookstore. That's where the Plattsburgh's first radio station was broadcast out of, was the Hotel Cumberland. I think it was WMFF.
WMFF, they changed call letters and changed frequencies when WIRY went on the air on January 30th, 1950. They exchanged frequencies. Mm-hmm. And WMFF was at 1340. Thereafter, WIRY was at 1340, and WEAV became 960 over the years. And it was located right there at 38 Court Street, tore the buildings down. The government center is located there now, and then its studios moved out to where the transmitter was and is, south of Plattsburgh, several miles. Oh, there's a nice picture of the Press Republican building in 1916.
Actually, that was the Republican.
Yeah.
Before it joined. It was taken and printed in 1916 when they merged with the Evening Star, and the first issue of their daily newspaper. That's when they transferred from a weekly to a daily paper.
Isn't it amazing? We've been around long enough to see them all of a sudden institute a Sunday newspaper. So they print 7 days a week. Court and Marion Streets.
It seems to be shortly after the fire that destroyed the Smith Weed Building, which is one of the finer entertainment centers in Plattsburgh. It was, from my understanding, a very beautiful theater. It was built in the later part of the 1800s, and it was state-of-the-art. It was boasted as being the finest theater available, bar none. Even considering the ones they had in New York City, they were very proud of that building.
Yeah, I've talked to many people who went to movies there, and now the law offices of Vera Asadorian. Oh boy, look at the old fire truck. Isn't that neat, Derek?
That picture would probably be taken shortly after they received that fire engine, which I think they bought it in 1915. So the picture was probably taken, within a year or two of that. And again, it's hard to tell exactly when a picture was taken, but that was state-of-the-art equipment there, and would shortly end the fire department's dependency on horses.
Yep. And there's the fire station on Cornelia Street, much the way it looks today. The 911 system, for example, was ensconced in that building for most of the early years. The emergency preparedness director worked out of there, and the dispatchers worked out of that same building, and now they're on the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base. More pictures of Bridge Street.
Reason I picked that one was because of the trolley tracks.
Yep.
Obviously, you're looking for Margaret. The person seemed to be up in a second-story window. Trolley being a memorable part of Plattsburgh history. It just gives you an idea of just what the city was like. And
it was probably a traffic light. Let me look down there. Yeah, slow to the right. There was one of the original traffic lights there. You see the pedestal with the light on the top? These great before and after pictures, a la Ron Venn, whom we'll talk to before we finish today. Another one of the downtown stores that doesn't exist anymore, Austin's men's store.
Yeah, upscale men's clothing store. It's started by Carlos Austin, was carried on by his son, Carlos Austin Jr. I think the store ended in '76 when he retired. And just a beautiful storefront. At night, just has a nice kind of glow to it.
It's a great building. And here we go, some more buildings. SUNY Plattsburgh, the Bargainier and Brinkerhoff Street.
Well, the SUNY Plattsburgh building is what's left of the old Champlain Hospital. And if you look past that one, you'll see the graduating class of 1950. That was the graduating nurses.
We wanted to interview some of the nurses because some of the nurses from the 1930s in the Champlain Valley Hospital are still around. We just didn't have time to get to all of them. But what a place it was, and that's the way it looked when I came to town. Champlain Valley Hospital circa 1920, and part of the building still exists, but you have to look for it carefully as you're heading up.
Yeah, that
River
is the
Street.
part that still exists. They demolished most of the building, leaving the newest wing around, probably because they considered it structurally sound, and SUNY Plattsburgh uses it, I think, pretty much for a storage room right now.
All right. That's kind of neat. Look at the Little Gem Restaurant, 1931. I love it.
That building was extremely difficult to find any information on. The picture was dated 1931. It was actually etched on the picture itself.
Oh, it was.
It didn't list in the city directory until 1933, and when it did, it listed at 234 Margaret Street. But you can clearly see the address in the picture.
Yeah.
And then a year later, closed down and no information available.
Isn't that interesting? I'm sure people viewing this will probably give us some more indication. Filions, which has been famous for so many years in downtown Plattsburgh as a popular watering hole.
Restaurant, bar, many different variations. So again, this started by Oliver Filion, and from what I know, quite a bit of the family is still around. And I think Filion's 3 was open until just several years ago, which used to be in the lower area of that building.
You learned a lot about history in doing these photographs, so you got a liberal education in the process, didn't you?
Oh, without a doubt, this was a very, very big learning experience for me. It was a kind of a crash course in local history. Spent many nights reading through different books and newspapers trying to figure out exactly what these pictures were and what I had here and some of the significance of them.
And if you didn't get an A on this project, I want to know why.
I think I should, and I'd like to know why too. But we have to wait for the grade.
That's coming out. When will that be coming out?
Well, right now I'm here on an incomplete. So the second I finish this, I have a bachelor's, and hopefully my professor can get around to grading it, within a week or two. And I really hope he liked it. I worked very hard on it. And
I bet he does. Well, maybe we'll give him a copy of this video, and that'll be. For sure, that'll be a great A. Any comments, Calvin, as we go?
Nope.
Interesting, huh?
Yep.
Great old photographs. We've shown literally thousands of old photographs on this program as we very often go into people's homes who are in their 80s, 90s, 100 years old, and have them describe their family members and various other things. I think the first music store I ever remember in Plattsburgh was Hazen's Music Store on Clinton Street when I first arrived. I have no idea where that one was in 1917.
Actually, past this point, these pictures were brought in by different people or reproduced by Sylvia Stack, so a lot of the research wasn't done by me on these.
So you're not going to take credit for anything
not.
from here on? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I think I did my part. I don't want to take credit for somebody else's work.
That's wonderful. Sylvia, you can join us anytime here if you can add any more to some of these pictures. It's just photographs capture moments in time. And I think they also capture the emotion of the moment. And I think that's why people save photographs, because what you've done is stopped time. And when you take a photograph out of a drawer or display it as you are here, you're recreating that moment in time.
Yes,
so
you are.
People can recover the emotion of that parade, for example. What can you tell us about these pictures?
Well, I haven't done an in-depth study of all of these photographs as Derek has, but all of the photographs from here on, I'd say 95% of them are ones that I got from Feinberg Library, at SUNY Plattsburgh.
Thanks to our friend Wayne Miller.
Oh, Wayne Miller, without Wayne, this part would not have been produced. I have to say that. He was extremely helpful to me. I have the dates on these. Some of these things, having lived in Plattsburgh, I can remember myself not as far back as 1917.
We don't have to admit how far back, Sylvia.
No, it wasn't this far back, but this is the interior of a music store. I believe that was probably down on Margaret Street, and it was around 1917. Now, this is a parade. Now, you can see here, it's the dirt. All the roads are dirt here, and they're turning on the band is going from Margaret Street onto Brinkerhoff Street, and that was probably around the early 1900s or late 1800s. Now, this building is still here in Plattsburgh. That's now the Supreme Court Library, and that's right over on the corner of Oak and Clinton. It's interesting to see the people on the street and the clothing that they're wearing.
Oh, it certainly is.
Now, this is right here down on the corner of Bridge and Margaret. This is the interior of Katie's Drugs, and that was before the bank was built that now houses Zachary's down there.
And we should mention, of course, that Katieville was named after the Katie family.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And this is what it looked like prior to the building of the bank, which this is the interior of the bank that's down there. This was built, this was knocked down, and this was built. That was the early 1900s.
That was another magnificent edifice, wasn't it? Huh?
Yes, actually, if you look at all of the architecture around in Plattsburgh, like the courthouse, the federal building across the road, the bank on the corner here, I think, which is Key Bank now, this bank, you'll all notice they were taken from the Greco-Roman style, and we really had some excellent buildings, the courthouse, so we really have some beautiful architecture within Plattsburgh.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? Look at the band on Clinton Street. Oh, my, great pictures. New arcade barber shop interior. Look at this.
Oh, yeah, and look at the men's hairstyles. I think it's so interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
When we were here for the opening on Friday night, April 7th, Senator Ron, April 6th, was it 6th?
April the 7th.
7th. It was the 7th on Friday, right?
Friday was the
No,
6th.
Saturday.
Oh,
Saturday, April the 7th.
Saturday the 7th. I got you. Calvin's got a calendar in his head. I knew it was on, I kept saying Friday, but it was on Saturday. Senator Stafford was here, and he was particularly taken with these two photographs here, because he was around when Governor Dewey was here in 1950, and he was pointing out to folks who were with him who all the people were in these photographs. I love them.
Oh, yeah, I think James Fitzpatrick is in that photograph, along with Governor Dewey. And at the top there, we have President Taft. Actually, Plattsburgh in the early 1900s was quite a popular place, so that we had presidents up here, and we had all kinds of political people, and we were quite important.
I think we still are, but in those days, we had the trolley tracks going all the way out to the Champlain, Hotel Champlain, and it was kind of a prestigious place up on the bluff back in those days, and this was a tourist area.
It was a very big tourist area, and one of the things that I was impressed about when I was choosing all of these photographs was how important, how many photographs I came across of the Hotel Champlain, outside, inside, people there, and it really played a big part in our culture here.
That's neat. All right. Looking over here on the right-hand side, we see, oh, what is this? Look at the stool.
This is a chair that's called a posing stool, and this belongs to John Wayne Johnston, and it's wood, and all of the carvings are in plaster. It's from the mid-1800s, and what people would do is they would sit on here and pose when their photograph was being taken.
The exposures took a little while back in those days, so they had to stay still, and if they couldn't stay still, you had a wire brace that went up their back with a little, like a clamp that held their head straight.
That must have been interesting.
Oh, and then you touch off the powder and scare everybody to death and risk burning down the studio, and well. Here's the famous Ticonderoga on Lake Champlain.
Yes, I can remember when I was a child going on that boat. My mother would take us on the weekend. You'd have a box lunch and you would ride up and down Lake Champlain. They had an orchestra on it and they would play and people would dance. They'd have a moonlight cruise. I think it was on Friday night or something like that. And
Ooh,
it
Sylvia.
was real. I wasn't on the midnight cruise. I was too
Ooh,
little.
Sylvia.
Yeah, but it was really very, very nice and people really enjoyed it.
And now you can
I
go to
think it-
Shelburne Museum, and
Yes, it's over in the Shelburne Museum now.
they've restored it within the last few years again. They also used to have the actual movie footage of taking it out of the lake, moving it up over the snow and ice on these ramps and rails to get it to its present location. That was quite a project way back when.
Oh, yeah, that's very interesting. I've been over to Sherbrooke. That's another good, Shelburne, rather. That's a very good.
There you go. There's
Here we
this
are, yes.
wonderful
Mhm.
bank right here.
This is in the 1920s. You can tell by the autos and everything, and the streets. Look at the beautiful trees. Such a lovely street, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Kind of like a peacefulness about that picture.
We saw one picture of the city beach that Derek had done. There's another one with horses and
Horses,
cars.
That was the very early 1900s.
Oh, I love this picture of the D&H station. Thank goodness that building still exists. It was almost directly across from the Fouquet House. And look at that train. Look at that steam train.
Yeah, there's something about trains, I think, that everyone loves, whether you're a little child
Everybody's
or...
imagination and memory, of course. I rode on steam trains as a child, lived right across from a train station in Thornwood, New York, and we were always fascinated, waving to the conductors and waving to the engineers when the train went by.
I think children still do that today,
Yeah.
as well as adults. Everyone loves trains.
They sure do. There's another parade in the 1940s.
That's World War II, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to locate more pictures of World War II, because actually we had so many different, we had the Navy during that time here. And it would really be very nice to recreate all of our military history, because we've had so much of it. We've just about had every branch of the service
We
here.
certainly have. The Plattsburgh and Clinton County area have been connected with the military since the very early days of our country back in Revolutionary times. And so we do have a rich military history. Duville Academy, which still exists thanks to the foresight of a man named Robert Carpenter, who took that old school, and we have a lot of people who went to school at Duville Academy that still live here, and now it's been turned into senior apartments, and it's really still quite beautiful inside.
Well, actually, I started school at Duville, and I went...
Come on.
No,
Sylvia,
and I
did
went,
you really?
yes, and I went up through the 7th grade there before I went to the public school. And
kidding.
yes, it was run by the Dominion nuns, and they gave you a very good education.
And they
Right.
saved, I think Bob saved the little chapel that was in there. When he first opened it into apartments, I went in and it was just charming. And for those people who went to school there, it's got to give you a little twinge every time you drive by.
Yes, and one of the things you can see in the background, I don't know if you
St.
can pick it up,
Peter's,
is
yeah.
St. Peter's way in the back, which that's been torn down since, but that was also a beautiful school.
St. Peter's High School closed. The students went up to Our Lady of Victory Academy up in the south end of town on Fox Hill. And when Our Lady of Victory Academy closed, it was a sad day for everyone. And then the Notre Dame grade school continued, and now it's called Our Lady of Victory again. And the old Our Lady of Victory became a secretarial school, and a lot of history in this town.
There is. I remember they had the Loretta Business School up there.
Oh, sure.
Yes. All of our churches have a great deal of history behind them.
The ethnic populations going to the Irish church and the
And the French going
And
to
the
St.
French
Peter's,
going to
yes.
St. Peter's.
hmm
Oh, look at the old light company. Would that be down behind Pine Street or wherever?
Yes, I believe that's where that is. I don't know if that's still there anymore,
I
is
don't
it?
know if any of the buildings
Buildings, I think
exist
they're all gone.
anymore. Can't remember. Calvin, we've talked so much about the Plattsburgh City Beach, as we called it, in the early 1960s. I think if that picture describes precisely what it was like down there, with traffic backed up in every direction.
Probably about 90% of all the people there are Canadians, because
Yes,
at
they
that
were.
time, we really depended on the Canadian tourists.
look at the mob scenes. Wow, some hot day during the summer of '63, right?
And they all came down Route 9 to get here.
Every all came
Before the
down.
Northway.
Yeah, before the Northway was completed. The Northway still wasn't completed when I came here. The old shirt factory, very famous old business and building. Weeds Flat, operational 93 through 31.
That would probably be down Weed Flats down around Weed Street, I would assume.
That's wonderful. And the synagogue on Oak Street, we did a wonderful program at Temple Beth Israel some time ago, and looked into the history of the Jewish synagogues here in town. I think the first rabbi I remember was Saul Oster. What a guy he was.
Well, I thought it would be nice to include that. I would have loved to have had all of the churches in here, but I could only have so many photographs. But I thought it was very important because so many of our businesses were Jewish-owned, and they became such an important part of our community in the support of it and everything. So I thought it was very apropos. That's a Reformed temple, I believe.
It's very interesting that your show here at this bank opened at a very important time on the Jewish calendar, too, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was the first night of Seder.
Isn't that amazing? All right, let's move on. Shall we go to the other side and look at some photographs? Oh, we got some more right down here. And I see John Wayne has arrived, so we're going to be talking with him about his stuff later on. All right. Oh, boy, look at these pictures.
Isn't this great? Look at the horse and carriage. This was 1911, and then in 1920, you'll notice they took off all the
the veranda,
frieze,
the porch,
and they added another story.
Oh, God.
So this is about 1920.
That's, the Witherell looked just about like that in the 1950s when I first came up here to work on the air base. That's basically what it looked like.
Yes, I think what they did do was they did a little bit more, they put some lattice work and did a few more things around here.
Oh, boy. Now you're getting into the Hotel Champlain that we talked about.
Yes, this was the first one, and its biggest popularity was when it was the old Hotel Champlain during that period. It still was very popular afterward, but it never attained the height that it was during this period. This was the new one. This one burned, and then they rebuilt this one.
All right, we're going to pause and put a new battery in the camera, and we'll return in a moment. All right, we've got the power. Yeah, the original Hotel Champlain, rebuilt after the fire around 1911. Delaware and Hudson Railroad. It's been several things. It was Bellarmine College for a time before it became Clinton Community College.
That's correct. It's really had a great history, and I'm so glad that they've really kept the hotel and done something with it because the land is beautiful. It's situated on the lake.
Oh, my,
And,
the bluff.
Now here you can see the interior. I want to show the interior and the opulence of that period and the types of entertainment, full orchestra, the dining room with a manservant at every single table.
Think about it, folks.
Yeah.
And a banquet for 4,000 guests. We don't have anything within 100 miles that can accommodate 4,000 people these days.
Or an occasion that would have 4,000 people because they entertained presidents and dignitaries from all over the world. Movie stars came there. It really was a very popular place and a place of luxury at that time. They also had their own railroad station.
Their own railroad station. You can see remnants of that as you drive up to the entrance to Clinton Community College. They had their own docks. The Ticonderoga and other of the pretty large boats could dock right there and let passengers off and embark.
Yes, they did that. And in fact, some of the hotels in Plattsburgh also did that. They had transportation to and from the docks, which I thought was so interesting. And they also had this little bus, I'd call it, or whatever,
Yeah, that's gonna
from Plattsburgh to Keysville, and it would stop at the hotel.
Oh, just great photographs. And again, the trolley tracks actually ran all the way out there. Down in the corner, well, speaking of the trolley, there's the summer trolley from the Plattsburgh Traction Company right on the left side there.
All right, that's back in the 1920s, and I think that trolley ran from 19 1911 to 1929. That's when the traction company built them. Now, this is the Hotel Cumberland.
Another view.
Right, and they used to have service to and from the boats. That's what they advertised, to and from the train or to and from the boats.
Oh, boy. Pepin and Musso livery.
Yes, that was, not sure exactly where that was located.
And neither do I, but I'm sure there are people who are. This is a very good picture. I've seen a postcard with that photograph on it and several other pictures because that was really a beautiful park.
It was a beautiful park, and it was right across the road from the Smith Weed House, and the Smith Weed House then became the American Legion, is now Senator Stafford's office. It really was elegant, and I often wonder whether or not this was the fountain that they took over to Trinity Park. You know, Trinity Park at one time had a fountain right across the road from the courthouse.
Yes, it did.
Yes, mm-hmm.
It could very well be. There were some beautiful areas in downtown Plattsburgh. There you are, Clinton Street in the 1960s. That surely looks familiar to me.
This whole section over here is kind of like in the mid-50s and 60s, except for, no, all of them are just about from the mid-50s and 60s, and it's kind of like so you can recreate downtown Plattsburgh in your mind. So you can go down, this is Clinton Street, looking toward Margaret, and I thought people would be interested in seeing the different signs of businesses and how they changed. This is City Hall Place. And you can see Stoughton's jewelry store there, and
the Delray,
and the Del Rey Hotel, right. And then Margaret Street with Schubert's and the Wise Shop and everything. I can remember those stores growing up, going with my mother to get clothes and things to Schubert's, and they're all old families from Plattsburgh. And here is M.H. Fishman. When I was in high school, I worked there.
Did you work in
Yes,
Fishman?
I did. I had to go back 3 times and tell the man finally, you said, keep telling me coming back, you got to hire me today.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
And we have Kinney's Shoe Store. And I think this was the facade of one of the hotels, I think maybe the
Sure.
Royal. Was it the Royal I had there?
Union? I don't know.
And this, the Union, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then here is Brinkerhoff Street, and you can see the big Genesee sign, Myers. They sold appliances. And here we have Jerry's Sub down on Margaret. You're on Clinton right here looking toward...
There's a little bit of radio history there because when WKDR went on the air, that's where their studios were located right above Jerry's Subs originally. And there's this building when it was State Bank.
Right, when it was State Bank, that's Brinkerhoff Street. And then down here we have a bridge looking east. And we have there, was the jeweler stores with your diamonds. Then we have Brinkerhoff Street. That would be looking at Beamer's, which was an old stationery store that actually just went out not that long ago.
Oh, and Marie is still going strong, volunteering for so many organizations. She's a wonderful lady and a real stalwart in this area.
And here we see Margaret Street with Montgomery Ward's, that eventually moved to the mall, and that company has now gone out of business also. And right here was the Champlain Valley Federal Savings and Loan.
Sure.
Another bank that has left, and that's over going towards St. John's Church. And then again, we have Margaret Street, Castles, another family that was here in Plattsburgh quite some time. And here we have Jerry Donnelly's. This is on Clinton Street.
Jerry Donnelly Limited, sure.
And this is on the...
Oh, look over here in the corner. Parking lot.
This, you're right, this is where the Hotel Cumberland used to be. It's now a parking lot. That would be on the corner of Cornelia and Margaret. The Army-Navy store used to be right across the road, the National Army store, which I think the Kaplan family owned. And then there's the First National Saving Bank. We saw the interior of that. That's on the corner of Margaret and Bridge. That was in the 1925. And And that's where Zachary's is today. But look at the beautiful architect with its palladium windows, kindly in the Greco-Roman style. It just seems like the street seems so broad, and you can see the trolley tracks in that.
Yeah. Great memories. Talk about names that that are indelibly inscribed in our minds. Beverly Pearls.
That's correct, and that again is the National Bank was on the corner of Bridge and Margaret. That now is Zachary's, and yes, that was a wonderful store, and that's when Plattsburgh was really great, having a lot of shopping and everything.
And the Plattsburgh Traction Company. There you go.
Yes,
A perfect
that's the-
example
yes.
of what the trolleys look like.
And that's the summer trolley.
Oh, isn't that neat?
And we do have a map of the trolleys.
We'll get to see
Yeah.
that later, right near one of the reproductions of the trolleys that our good friend Ron Venn did. Over here we have some photographs that certainly evoke memories for those of people, especially those who have a renewed interest in the Lozier Car Company and Lozier Boat Company in Plattsburgh. That building still exists.
Yes.
There was a point in time when it was declared one of the ugliest buildings on the face of the earth. They even had a contest to decide what color to paint it and how to paint it to make it more presentable. But it surely is a big part of our history. I have no idea what the Titan Corporation was. Do you?
No, I'm not sure what exactly they made, but I'm wondering if it's some type of tannery.
Yeah, it
With
could very
the
well.
Titan?
That would seem reasonable, but we know Lozier was in here for a while, and there are other photographs which show the docks right behind there. They were able to launch their Lozier boats right into the water right behind that building, very familiar now as part of the Georgia Pacific complex on North Margaret Street.
Yes. And that the docks would have probably been Wilcox docks
Yeah.
down below, and they also had the big oil tanks
Sure.
around there.
Above that, of course, the smaller pictures of
The smaller picture is Margaret Street in the early 1920s, and what I wanted to show there is a department store, Sharon's department store, which was a very beautiful department store. It was kind of like in league with Merkel's, and he was the first, Albert Sharon was the first mayor of Plattsburgh, so I thought that would be good to show. There's a lot of interest. I'm sure a lot of people remember that store. And above is a parade of the, I think it was during the centenarian we had.
me, Centennial?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, look at this picture, Second World War era
Yeah.
of Der Fuhrer, Blitz Hitler. Look at this. They were collecting things in downtown Plattsburgh, all kinds of metal things. And you remember when they had so many different kinds of drives.
They did have so many different drives, and the people were so united at that time. It was a sad time, but it was also a great time in the sense of working together and pulling together for a common cause.
Gee whiz. Cloud him with a coffee pot, that nasty little man. Isn't that unbelievable? And then the Press Republican from 1944. First Army within 5 miles of major barrier to the Rhine, 2 German strongholds, and Slovakia fall to the Russians. Boy, headlines that bring back childhood memories for me, that's for sure.
I can remember that myself. I remember VE Day, VJ Day.
Oh, boy.
Even though I was a very little girl, I had 2 brothers that were in the service, and you could just tell, and you just sense from the adults and everyone around you the tremendous excitement.
I can remember in school.
And relief.
And just the teachers dancing and
Yeah.
jumping on this when the announcements came over the public address system. And you mentioned Normandy in France, and just a couple of months ago I had the occasion to visit the National D-Day Memorial Museum in New Orleans. It's been open since last summer. It's an incredible place that brings the memories alive again.
Well, that was a very strong period of our life. I mean, it lasted for over 4 years. So There was a great deal of tension and watching. I can remember every night at 6 o'clock my father had to put the news on. So I think I developed a love of history really from having lived through the Second World War.
We were lucky, I'm sure you were, as I was. My father had a sense of history, and when historical things happened, he would take us there. When the
Yes.
plane rammed into the Empire State Building, when the Normandy caught on fire and keeled over in New York City, my father took us there so we could see it burning because he knew this was a big part of history, and I thank him for doing that.
Yes, and I can remember as a very little girl that in Trinity Park they had what they call the honor roll board,
Yes.
and they listed everyone that went into the different branches of service, and then if someone were to be killed, they'd put a star. And I can remember going down there and with other children and my parents, and we would read who was there and what has happened, so that it was a constant thing every day in your life, and you were, following it. So it had to make a very big impression on you.
It absolutely did. It was such a powerful time in our nation's history. All right, let's move over yonder here. And what do we have? Let me move over here next to you.
This is another photograph. This is actually the boys from Plattsburgh leaving to go to Cuba in 1897 for the Spanish-American War. And even though it's not in the 20th century, I was just so impressed. It was just another fact to show this very long military history that Plattsburgh has. And this next picture, these are recruits from New York City coming up to Plattsburgh to be trained in 1921.
Isn't that terrific?
And what I find interesting about this photograph is, look at their straw hats, their ties, their white shirts and suits. And if you compare it to the generation today, if you leave to go off, you probably would be going in jeans and a sweatshirt,
Yeah, like I said, we had a tremendous military history and presence here in Plattsburgh, and what is now called the ROTC program nationwide actually got a start right here in Plattsburgh.
Yes, it did.
New York.
These gentlemen that are coming are from the ROTC from New York City. It looks like in that picture, that's the railroad station, but it looks like it was prior to the architecture of today down there, if you notice the roof line and everything.
That's terrific. Well, we have more to see, and so we're going to join some of our other presenters here and take a look at the models and the old photographic equipment. We're making this tape at 30 Brinkerhoff Street in downtown Plattsburgh at the old Merchants Bank building, which is now the North Country Cultural Center for the Arts, presenting a look back to yesterday, 20th century Plattsburgh in black and white. John Wayne Johnston is here. John, how you doing?
Good.
We're glad you could make it here today, and we're so glad you shared some of your passion for photography and photographic equipment with us. First of all, let's tell people that you teach at Clinton Community College.
Clinton Community College, correct. We're in the process of, I'm in the process of a feasibility survey right now, and with any amount of luck, we'll have a photographic program at Clinton in the upcoming years.
Isn't that wonderful?
Exciting times.
You've enjoyed this field for most of your life, haven't you?
Correct. Since I was 18, I met the darkroom, as they say. It was my senior year in October, and that's when the light went off. And prior to that, I was a bassoonist, and I was looking at the music field. But
So you see where life takes you.
Yeah.
That's that word serendipity again. This is only a small part of your collection. You have much more.
Correct. This is about 1/3, and I'm not saying that in a boasting sense, but there are some key pieces here that I brought out for the exhibit, and I've been talking with Sylvia about possibly someday having the entire exhibit displayed.
Wow.
So
Let's just go through briefly and
Sure.
describe each one. Hold on a second. I got to mention John's wife, Heather. What a fine actress she is. We just completed a two-person play called Love Letters at Clinton Community College over the past weekend, and it wasn't well attended, but it was well accepted. She was terrific.
thank you. I will tell you said that.
Yeah, she made me cry, so, So tell me what we have here.
Okay, here is a lantern slide projector. This would basically be the early version of a slide projector that we use now. Of course, we're switching over to computers and PowerPoint, so our modern day slide projector will probably become obsolete. But I don't know if Calvin can see this. This is a glass lantern slide. And it's of a scene in Paris that's been colorized. And this was the projector that was used. It would slide into a frame. As you can see, there's one in here right now. And then you would just slide it in and be able to project it on the wall. The early versions used kerosene lamps or oil lamps for illumination. And this one had been modernized with electric, which you can see the glass gels here that were used to make sure the wick was still lit, so or the intensity was bright enough back when it was used as a kerosene or oil projector.
Oh, that's neat. All right, next.
A plate brownie camera. A lot of people are familiar with the box brownie cameras that are very popular by the Eastman Kodak company. This one here is one of the earlier versions that utilized glass plates instead of the roll film, which the majority of them did. And this would be the glass plate holder, and it would slide into the back. And you would pull out your dark slide, close the lid, and then you were able to make your exposure. And then you could put the dark slide back in, and this one only has one film plate holder, but you could hold another 2 plates for a total of 3, so you would have 6 exposures.
What time period would that be?
Turn of the century, roughly 1900. Yeah, I should say 1900s, because we've just turned the century.
Look at this.
This device
The
here...
Opticon.
Opticon, correct. This device here was used for projecting postcards or postcard-sized prints. And the way it was done is in the back here. You pull out the old wiring. The card would slide right in here, or the print would slide right in the back here, and you'll see there's 2 parabolic dishes and 2 old light bulbs, and then that would light up here, and it would illuminate the card, and then through the optics, you could again project it on the wall. It's very similar to the old lantern slides when back in the mid to late 1800s, magic lantern, correct. 1800s, people would gather for enjoyment and see prints, much like we do with photographs today.
Sure. All right, what's this?
Flexo Kodak camera number 2. This one's kind of unique. It follows the box design, except for with roll film, with this style of camera would wrap around here. What was interesting was the way that the whole camera would basically come apart. As I'm losing a piece. The whole camera would come apart, so you could load the film, and then you would put the wrapping all around it, and then close the front to keep it together. They perfected the other cameras, making them simpler and easier for the general consumer to use them. But this is one of the earlier models. As you can see, it's kind of cumbersome. You have so many parts. What's nice with this one is this is still intact. The way that they were held together was by fabric and leather, and almost all of them now you'll find in 3 pieces, but this one is still together.
Fortunate there. It's
Let's hope it stays like that.
Oh boy. Some of these look more familiar to me.
Okay. This one is from about the 1950s, 1960s. It's a Brownie flash camera. It used I believe, either a 127 or a 620 film. I think that one was a 620. Yes. Flash Brownie 620 film. And this one here is a blue pocket Kodak, probably around 1930s, 1940s, right around there. What's unique about this is a lot of these cameras were made just like the box Brownie cameras. However, this one is the color blue, and there were 4 colors that were made. I have one that's in bad shape that's in a brown, but I do have the original sale poster that would show all 4.
That's kind of neat. I had no idea that there were different colors. All right. More boxes.
This right here, this is more of the modern era box Brownie camera. Much simpler than the other one. The back would slide off, and you could load your film into the camera instead of having to have a whole wraparound back. Came with a nice case. right here that you could carry with you on vacation. Whatever. Little small purse for the ladies for the beach.
Oh, my goodness. One of the most famous of all New York businesses, Kodak, right?
Correct. Correct, by George Eastman. These here are our pocket folding cameras. This one is the earlier of the two, much smaller in size, collapses, and you can fit it right in your pocket. Thus the name pocket folding cameras. However, there are larger formats that are still termed pocket folding, and it's just the term that had been coined with those cameras and stayed with it. Either that or people had just larger pockets back then. This is more, this would be modern saying in the 40s, 50s. It was designed, this was a whole kit, and it was designed for the females with the different colors, more of a feminine touch to it, and there was a whole makeup kit that came with this camera.
Oh,
so good marketing technique.
Isn't that unbelievable? Uh-huh.
Here again, folding cameras. This one here is just a straight folding, and this one's an autographic folding. And what they mean by autographic is you would have your film inside the camera here that would wrap around from the top to the bottom. And wherever you were photographing, if you wanted to document the event, you would pull out a little pin,
Oh, hell. Well, I remember
little
those.
metal pin, correct. And then on this part of the back of the film, you could write where you were, and then you would just hold it up to the sun for a couple of seconds or so to make sure that it burns into the film, and then you could close it. So when your prints are developed, then you would have down at the bottom, family at the beach.
Au Sable Chasm,
Yeah, the Au Sable Chasm.
1916.
That's why you'll see a lot of photographs at antique shops or collection shops, and it'll have written on there, and it'll be in white, because when you press on the film, it'll make a black mark, a very dense mark on the film, so when it prints, it's the reverse, so it'll be solid white.
Wonderful idea. Some more folding cameras.
Correct. More folding cameras. These are earlier. These are two of the earliest pieces. This one here from 1905 to 1915. Actually, both of them were made between that time. What's unique is one is a single viewfinder and the other one is a double viewfinder. And what they did is this one right here, you could only photograph vertical with this camera. If you wanted to do a horizontal, it was kind of hard. You'd have to hold it
yeah.
at this angle. Whereas this camera could do both vertical and horizontal very easily, and you could be able to trip the shutter and not have to look at it cockeyed to try to see what you're looking at.
Makes perfect sense to
And
me.
again, the whole folding aspect. Slip it right into your pocket.
Very clever. Here's a very famous camera.
Correct. A lot of well-known photographers utilize this camera. This camera is in working condition. With the rest of the cameras here, they are in working condition. So if I could coat some glass plates, I could go out and photograph with them tomorrow. This camera right here, the way it was used, it's a Graflex autographic. You would look through here. This would be your viewfinder. It was one of the first reflexing mirrors. So what you would see is what you would get on the film. Very cumbersome. You'd carry it around, you would look through here, so you could look through the viewfinder as you're focusing, and then when you had your image, you could trip the shutter. The shutter was a curtain in the back that would act as a modern day shutter today. It was not in the lens. This one here was designed to take film packs, so it was more styled for press photographers or professionals. And this film pack that Kodak would make would be loaded with 4x5 film, which prior to that you had to, well, even during the time, you had to carry around film packs that would only carry 2 sheets of film. Whether it was this one here, you could have 8, 10, sometimes 12 sheets of film, and it was very easy. You could slip it right into the back, close it. It would operate very similar to a Polaroid, and you could pull out one shot. You could pull out the dark slide, you would take your photograph, and as you kept pulling, the film would just reverse itself right in the pack, and when you were finished, you took the pack out and took it right down for processing. Generally, most of the photographers processed it themselves back then.
Very, very popular among newspaper people.
Correct.
Early movies, you'll see that Graflex camera quite a bit.
Excellent camera.
Wonderful displays. All right, next.
Next. This camera over here came out of, I believe, from what I've researched, the Brush Studio here in Plattsburgh, New
yeah,
York. So
very
this is a
famous studio.
hometown camera. This camera was made by the Eastman Kodak Company. It is a number 9A Century Studio camera made between 1910 and 1945. It is on a number 1A semi-centennial Eastman Kodak stand. Beautiful piece of furniture.
Amazing.
Fully operational, it was designed for 8x10 glass plates or 5x7 glass plates. You could get reducing backs or even 4x5 glass plates. What's unique about this camera is it was used in studios. It wasn't something that was brought along on location. The way you would operate it, sorry about that.
That's all right.
You could raise and lower the camera right here. If you wanted to change the angle, there was a movement in the back that would let you raise it, lower the angle, or raise the angle. The photographer would have a hood that would go over the camera and himself to photograph. Down at the bottom here, you'll find soft focus filters, which are much smaller now and more compact. But the photographer could hold these in front of the lens for whenever he was doing portraiture to add a nice soft focus to any person that was interested in portraiture. The unfortunate thing about these cameras is when they started to become obsolete, which was the late 40s, early 50s, because they were becoming obsolete and they were so huge, a lot of them were chopped up and used for firewood, which is unfortunate.
What a tragedy.
It is, and if you think of the just the art and the craftsmanship that went into these cameras and the stands, it's sad, but fortunately this one survived.
That's great. Okay. Here's a nice collection. What do we got here?
These cameras here are the earliest that are in here. These are from the late 1800s. They are, again, glass plate cameras. You have to remember the Daguerrean era, which was roughly around 1836, 1839 with the first cameras. These cameras here are about 1890, so we're still at the very beginning of photography. Most of the cameras that you saw here had shutters for the exposure. What's unique about these cameras is the way the exposure was made was by the lens cap. They would remove the lens cap, everybody would have to be still, they'd make the image, and then they would cap it up. That's how the exposure was done. Some photographers, as you can see in the movies or in historical documentaries, you all see the photographer behind the camera holding a wooden pallet, and all of a sudden, poof, you'd see a bunch of light. Magnesium was used back then to make a flash. Disadvantage, it was very, very explosive, and some photographers, if they didn't move their thumb quick enough to trigger it, would lose their thumb.
Serious
So
injuries.
one thing that Eastman Kodak came out with was a Kodak flash sheet holder, and you could buy packages of flash sheets, and you would put them on the back here, and there was a way that you ignited it in the back, and then you could hold this, basically trip your thumb, and you had metal here to protect yourself, but it would provide the flash so you could illuminate your subject.
All right, we're going to stop and put another battery in and continue.
Okay.
All right, we're back again. Now, there's some beautiful stuff here.
This camera down here is a cartridge Kodak Model E. It utilized roll film, and I'll take off the back here so you can see just how big the film was back then. But that is an example of the size of the film here that would fit, and this is the image that you would have. A lot of images with cameras back then, you have to remember, were contact prints, meaning that they took the negative and they took a piece of photographic paper and exposed it to light. They didn't really do a lot of enlarging because usually that was left up to the professional photographer. It's not like today where we shoot 35 and there's an Eckert on every corner that we can get film processed, which fortunately there is today, but back then contact prints were made, so that's why you always find smaller photographs.
Of course, we're in the digital age now, and you don't have to do any of those things.
Sometimes you don't even have to think with the digital
No,
age,
that's
which
true.
is sad.
This is kind of a unique and rare piece right here.
This is a number 3 panoramic Kodak camera made from 1926 to 1928. There were 4 panoramic cameras. This is the rarest of the 4. It was only made for a short period of time. This camera here, I'll open up the back for you. Would have film over here. It would take size number 122, which I have a spool of it on the other table, would wrap all the way around here to the other end, and then you would set the shutter with the back closed with your film, and then by pressing this button, you can
Look at this.
see the lens slide right through, and this would
Do the
make
whole
it
panoramic
would do a
picture.
whole panoramic.
Isn't that look at this.
And to take a look at the inside of what it was like. I think you might be able to see, watch that spin around.
And have the
Pretty neat.
mechanism still work.
And the mechanism still works. There was a gentleman in Honey Eye Falls, New York, who's retired from Eastman Kodak, who cuts films for classic cameras. And so that's a place that I can buy some of the older films for when I'm doing demonstrations or just restoration.
That's really interesting. We got a couple more cameras over here, and then we're going to have to wrap it up and do a little bit of work with Ron Venn.
No problem. These right here, we can actually run through some of these. These are more modern. You're talking from roughly 1912, early 1920s. These cameras were made here. They're the typical press camera. When you hear the term paparazzi, they were using cameras like these. This one's more around the 1940s. This one over here is late 1940s, early 1950s. A lot of photographers in the press would utilize these cameras with film backs and flash bulbs, and even professionals for shooting weddings.
Oh, yeah.
Classic camera.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful pictures.
This one right here is from 1890 to 1900. We're going back again. This is a Primo camera made by the Rochester Optical Company. That they were bought out by the Eastman Kodak Company. Kodak actually bought around, there were many photographic companies in Rochester at one time, and then Eastman Kodak eventually bought them out. A lot of times the employees were kept and they were hired, and just that's what made Kodak as wonderful as it is today. This one here actually has some of the original soft focus filters if you wanted to do portraiture.
Absolutely beautiful. Oh, we got more over here.
This one right here is an Eastman 5x7 field camera. It was used for glass plates and also sheet film, which was later developed, which was easier to carry and less cumbersome. In working order, I've taken this one out in the field a couple of times. Sometimes, being a historian collector, you have to compete with the user because they're still widely used, and the wooden construction, just a very classic look to it. Down here are folding brownie cameras. They're basically the same kind. This is just to demonstrate the different sizes you could receive. You can see this one's bigger. We have a little medium size, and then a smaller one over here. What's unique about them, they all have red bellows. Whenever you see a camera that has a set of red bellows, usually means it's rarer, because most of the bellows were made out of black leather instead of being tanned and having a red leather.
I've learned a lot. All right, let's quickly scan the table here. All right, let us head over this way.
If we can start here.
Sure we can.
This right here is a number 1 brownie, number 1/number 0, because I'm not sure if that's the original instructions. This brownie is one of my pride and joys. It has never been used. It has never been opened. I kid you not, gospel truth. If you look on the back here, you will notice that the metal has not been tarnished by years of people's fingers, and there is a seam of leather that how the camera back was held together. When I purchased the camera, I couldn't find any cracks, and I started to open it a little bit, and I could hear it crack just a hair. so I just closed it. So this one has never been used, plus it has the original box, which I've only seen the original boxes to Brownie cameras at the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York. So that's a pride and joy. Another smaller roll film camera here, a Primoette by Kodak. This camera here, this one's kind of unique. There were 550,000 of these cameras made in 1930, and George Eastman gave one to every boy and girl that was 12 years of age to make photography readily available so everybody could. He was such a generous man, and the history of George Eastman is just amazing. Gave one of these, the Eastman Kodak, George Eastman, to every child that was 12 years of age. And it was called an anniversary Kodak. This symbol here that you'll see is silver, was originally gold, but the gold has eventually rubbed off. But this is one of those cameras from 1930. Some glass plates, an example of a glass plate negative, and various photographic prints ranging up to the modern era. Here is some early darkroom equipment, what you would find in a darkroom. This is a kerosene safe light, which now you always see the red light in a darkroom. Well, this was done with kerosene back then. Here is a glass plate enlarger that's in working order. I am just in the process of restoring the bellows on this one. Various plate developing box, timer, some early papers, some coated glass plates. This camera right here, it's mixed in. This is a Leica 3F from around 1930. More chemistry over here to go with the darkroom. We have a set of Eastman scales for measuring out chemistry, because a lot of chemistry had to be mixed up raw. It wasn't like today where we can run and get a certain package. A Kodak developing tank, a lot of Kodak chemistry. This is something very unique. We all know Kodak as the yellow father, always yellow and red. But in its early beginnings, for about 8 to 10 years, I believe, from research, they had black and white at the beginning. And this is Eastman developing powders in a black and white box. Then they started to add color with some of the roll films, and then immediately went into this design, and you can always remember it. This is an Ambro-type image right here, made by P.T. Gates in Plattsburgh, New York, from 1984, July 4th and 11th, 1854. Did I say 1854? And an Ambro-type used acids to make the image. So when I remove the back, you can see a negative. And when I put the back on it, now you see the photograph.
Oh, golly.
And that is a quarter plate. A few other photographic prints. Children love this. When I teach history of photography to children, I always bring in as many cameras, that some of them that they can touch and hold, and this one right here is actually a spy camera. This is fairly modern, but if you watch the History Channel, you can see that this was actually used a lot during the Cold War. This has the complete setup with it. A Nikon rangefinder camera, Nikon S2. Now we're starting to get into the modern era. And over here in this book is kind of a mix of showing different aspects of photography. We have a few spy cameras, the small midget cameras. We have a few Leicas. We have an old daguerreotype, an Ambro-type, a 16th plate daguerreotype, novelty cameras, and a magnesium flash, a German magnesium flash. Looks like a little cigarette case, but it was a thin wire of magnesium that would feed through there, and you would ignite it, and the way you would illuminate your image would be to hold it and have the camera open, and then you would just go up and down. You would paint with light what professional photographers do sometimes to illuminate a large area.
What a great collection. John, I want to
you.
thank you so much for being with us today. We're sorry we took you away from your class. We hope they forgive you, and I want to promise...
I'm sure they will.
I want to promise our viewers that someday when you're ready to present your entire collection to us,
love to
we'll
do it.
set it up and do an entire 2-hour show with you alone and let people know what passion for photography is.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd love to do it. And I also would like to thank you and Calvin for what you do for the area. It is so nice that people can see what happens in our area. I think a lot of people don't realize that, yes, there's a lot of exciting things that happen in Plattsburgh. You just have to sometimes turn to the right channel, and you can see what's going on. So thank you both.
Today we have history all around us. Again, John, best of fortune and
Thank
good
you.
fortune in everything you do.
Thank you. I
See you
appreciate
later.
it. Take care.
Now we get to spend a few minutes with a gentleman who should have his name and his address at 72 Bailey Avenue etched right below the Our Little Corner logo for this program on Hometown Cable. We've talked to him many times before. Ron, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
Isn't it fun to be in a presentation like this in downtown Plattsburgh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
neat. We saw you when you were building these Lozier automobiles, and now they're finished. And I had forgotten that you told us there were 868.
8 parts in building the car. There's 1,736 parts in both cars. There's 204 parts in the motor. There's 31 parts to make the wheel, or the wheels each.
What makes them different? How come you did one this way and one the other way?
Well, I was going to build it out of wood in the first place, but then I thought I'd build another one and paint it like the way some of the cars used to be painted back then. So I found a photograph of the car in color, so that's what I went from. So I went with a blue and a white, and then the other one I did it in a wood stain.
Well, you did a magnificent job. Did you count how many hours you spent on them?
Yeah, there's 905 hours. It took me 6 months and 2 days to build. I started in June 2000, and I finished in November. I think it was November 14th of 2000.
You've done a wonderful job. We watched you as you were building the entrance to the old Clinton County Fairgrounds right behind your house on Bailey Avenue. I have with me an actual photograph. I can't remember if you showed us that photograph before, but this is what the fairgrounds really looked like. I don't know what year that picture was taken, Ron. Come on over here. Do you know?
Oh, probably around, I don't know, 1916, 1900s, something around like that.
There have been several different places for the fairgrounds here in the city, but this was the one that you did, and you told us how many shingles on the roof?
Well, there's 533 shingles on the roof. Yeah, they're glued on one at a time. So
That's great. We should point out that Ron Vinn has been a very popular subject for our little corner. How many have we done with him? Just nine programs. And we could probably do 9 more, because this before and after photograph concept that's being utilized here during this showing at downtown Plattsburgh was his baby. Ron's been doing this for, 6, 7 years?
well, since 1995,
Yeah. About 6 years you've been doing this, and now are you up to how many pictures?
1008.
1,008 pictures. Ron does not only the photographs, magnificent job of the models. You can see some of his things here, which we've seen before. Excuse me. Part of the history of Plattsburgh has to do with the trolley company, the Plattsburgh Traction Company. And these models, were these among the first models you did? When did you do these models?
Well, I got them dated. I think one was, probably some I did in 97, 98. I think the summer car was built in 98. So
Well, we saw photographs of the summer cars and the winter cars. The Plattsburgh Traction Company was in operation for a long time. There were trolley tracks under the streets. Some of the streets still have tracks under them,
they
I
still
think.
do. Even Blair and Weber, where the car barn used to be, the tracks are still underneath the floor.
Yep. That's up by the Armory, right, on
Yeah.
US Avenue.
That's where the car barn was located.
And here is an actual picture, map of the Plattsburgh Traction Company routes in 1920. They had a pretty extensive track system, didn't
Yeah,
they?
it was about 6.5 miles long. Went through the city up to Bluff Point, then back into the city again.
Along with these models, Ron has done a large number of dioramas of mostly World War II scenes. How many of those?
I got about 98, something like that.
I tell everybody 100, and hopefully, with the popularity that you'll be generating by having your things shown with Sylvia down here in downtown Plattsburgh, we'll find a permanent location to display all of your models, because these are things that must be shared. You are such a wonderful guy and a wonderful creative talent that we want people to see your things. That's kind of a unique, that last
Well,
one down there.
That's a scene in railroad snowplow. It was mostly pushed by 2 diesel engines because it didn't have an engine itself. It mostly had a stovepipe disc to keep the inside warm. It was an insulated car, but usually it was like 2 trains that pushed it through the snow banks, drifts, and
And you made that one in 1993. We've just got a couple minutes left. We're going to go find Sylvia and wrap it up today. Ron Venn, thanks for your friendship, and thanks for sharing all the good things you do with us. We can't wait to see what you're going to do next, okay?
okay.
All right, Sylvia's going to try to open the vault. I don't know if we're going to... Look at how that
See, is it
turns.
turning over here?
Yeah, it's turning.
Okay, it
Just
takes
keep it-
quite a while. Yes.
Look at how easily it turns, huh? Isn't that neat?
Notice how that rod is coming up over there?
Yes, I do. Oh, look at this.
See how it's starting to open?
How heavy is that door?
It's quite heavy.
Yeah, but you're just a little lady and you're able to... Must be balanced very well, huh?
Yes, it's balanced with these bolts down here and
Yep.
over here.
Oh, that's incredible.
15 ton.
Oh, isn't that... We got mirror in there, and look at this door. Calvin, just take a look at this door. Isn't this amazing? This is we only have a couple of minutes left in our program. Don't get hurt when that door opens. Just amazing, the technology. Sylvia, while we're looking inside here, we want to thank you so much for inviting us here today. We love your exhibit.
Thank you so much, Gordy, and I can't tell you how much our organization appreciates your doing this show on us and giving us this little boost.
So, as I said, we're recording this in early April 2001. We hope to have see a lot of history inside this building in the future as I just follow Calvin inside, just so I can say we were in the vault. Has a very special aroma in here, doesn't it, Calvin, huh? Has kind of a musty smell. Looks almost like a prison, right?
This was temperature controlled.
This was temperature
Yes, it was
controlled?
temperature controlled.
It's temperature controlled today. It's about 31 degrees here right now with a big mirror across the back and those telltale tiles on the floor.
Those were all ceramic tiles. Those are original tiles. And then you have this gate that came across.
Oh, yes. Heavy
I
heavy
can't
gate.
get it to work.
No.
Yeah.
Don't lock us in. We don't want to do that. I don't know why this panel would be here on the floor.
Well,
do
this
you?
would go over.
Oh, I
This
see.
would come down, and then that would let the people walk up.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, look at how thick that door is. That's absolutely incredible.
It's 1.5 feet thick.
Well, it's time to wrap it up. Sylvia, thanks so much for inviting us here today. We want to wish you the best of good fortune. We want to thank Derek for being with us, Ron Venn, John Wayne Johnston for his contribution, and a lot of other people that work behind the scenes to help you getting these photographs together from the Feinberg Library all across town. Congratulations. We're proud of you. We love your dreams and your vision, and I think we'll be back again.
Thank you so much, Gordy, and I hope you do come back again.
And who knows where we're going to be next